instrumentality and crime needed to enforce, right? Now again, I'm going to come back up here to the rule. Do we have any relevant definitions that we should add to our rule statement so that you can show me you know what this means?
Or necessary.
For necessary, we've discussed necessary specifically.
It has to be useful and convenient method of doing whatever they are willing to do.
Which means it doesn't have to be the only way they accomplish that goal, but rather that this is a possible way of accomplishing the goal. Right? Okay, any questions on where we are so far? Yes?
So, in giving definition for necessary, we wouldn't even have the definition for proper because there's no bright line rule as to what proper is.
And because we have not focused on it and Sibelius made it all in flux.
Right, so should we talk about that in this part or, okay.
Only give me the definitions of the things that we have talked about what the definitions are, right? So we spent a lot of time on necessary. We spent 0 time on proper, right? This is why class attendance is important. Okay, so for every, yes?
Just before you move on, I was really tripped up on possession, like for an economic activity versus possession for a non-economic activity, just with Raish and stuff.
Yes. So this is Raish and Wickard, which is the wheat case, and Sibelius, which is the healthcare case. So, again, Supreme Court's not super clear on this, so it's normal to be confused. What we have discussed is that where you possess a good, even if you don't intend to sell it, but you possess it within an existing regulated market, that is considered to be an economic act, right? So in the wheat case, they were growing wheat, had no intention to sell it, but there were a lot of regulations and existing market around the wheat. So they could have sold it and could have affected the market. The same with marijuana, right? Except that here the regulation was the Controlled Substances Act, right? And so existing regulation, existing market. In contrast, for healthcare, it was non-possession, right? It was failure to possess, which created the penalty, which is why the court said that that was a non-economic act. They didn't possess it within an existing market, but rather it was failure to possess. Does that make sense? All right, for any other questions? Okay, for each proposal, you also need to give me a counter argument. What would be a counter argument to proposal 1? Yes?
The 10th Amendment, let
Yes.
states regulate?
When in doubt, go for the 10th, right? The 10th Amendment is the most used counter argument against federal activity because of the balance between federal and state powers. So if you've got a federal law and you're trying to figure out, can they do that? The counter argument is they can't do it because it somehow intrudes on states' rights. Okay? So for this, your counter argument is 10th Amendment, all rights. Okay. I'll scroll down a little bit. So your 10th Amendment is your counter argument. This is the rule. What would you argue in terms of analysis? What do we know about states and their areas of authority compared to the Fed?
States are laboratories, so they have a wider breadth to experiment at different types of law.
Sure, you could talk about states as labs. What else could you talk about there?
Policing powers?
States have general powers, right? They have general powers, right? So states are primarily for the health, safety, where anything from any of our states' rights cases would be analysis at this point. Okay. That's it. You could also, let's see. So basically, your argument here is that it's invading states' authorities. If you decided to do your counter argument just for N and P, which I didn't give points, I gave points for one counter argument per proposal, right? I didn't care which one you gave me. So 10th Amendment is valid, right? You could also do an attack on NNP itself, that it's too attenuated the link, right? The creation of the crime. That was a common counter argument that we saw in the cases. Now you've given me the rule for N and P up here. So on my exams, if you have given me a rule once, you do not need to repeat it within the question, right? I'm not trying to waste your time, right, or my time, because y'all love to cut and paste. And it drives me wild. It really just. Because I have to spend time reading all those words to see did you cut and paste or did you actually write something new, right? So what for you is a little click is an extra 5 minutes that I have to spend grading that section of your paper. Not a fan. So part of the way I'm trying to get around this is if you give me the N and P rule in question 1, you never have to give me the N and P rule again in question 1. You do have to do it from question to question, however, because of the way that I grade. The first 10 exams that I grade by question, not by exam. Because I want to get a sense of how people are engaging with the question. I want to get a sense of whether I'm grading fairly across questions, right? And so I don't want to just grade one exam, question 1, 2, 3, 4 straight. The first 10, I do 10 random question 1s. And then I do 10 random question 2s, not necessarily those same 10. So because I will grade initially by question and not by exam, you will have to give me the rule from question to question, but not within the same question. Is that distinction clear?
Yes.
And that will save you time and hopefully cut down on the I need to cut and paste impulse. Yes.
For formatting, where do you want us to put the counter argument? Do you want us to put it after our whole entire IRAC, or can we put it in?
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. So on my grading sheet, it is at the end of each proposal or issue. But, you know, if you put it, you know, still follow IRAC, right? So the counter argument should have its own paragraph. Right? Some of y'all will go down this crazy rabbit hole where you say, well, Congress may be arguing this, but a state would say this, and then Congress would respond with this, and then the states would come back with this, and they would forget to give me the rules and analysis. They're so busy going back and forth between the two. And I think that that's not helpful, right? So a counter argument should be its own paragraph, should have its own IRAC, but I don't care where you put that paragraph. It could be, you know, at the end, it could be between two paragraphs. But it should be its own paragraph. Okay, other questions? No? All right, let's keep going. All right, so that's proposal 1, done, easy. Okay, proposal number 2. Oh, here you do some, like, add some language, right? So the rule, you'd say, you've got the rule above, you don't even have to say see above, you don't have to say anything. And then you're gonna go to, you're gonna go to analysis, it's to attenuated, and then you would talk about, you know, from piracy to the crime, ban. Okay. Proposal number 2, what's proposal number 2?
Taxes.
This is taxing, yes. So they wanna tax it out of existence. So that is the taxing power. What's the rule for tax?
Congress has power to lay and collect taxes. They can create any tax in spending. Oh, the Article 1, Section 8.
That is true, they have the power to collect taxes. Is it a broad power or a narrow power?
So it can only be exercised for general welfare.
That's right, so the rule is for the general welfare. I mean, you know, the rule is, Congress has the power to tax for the general welfare, but we're doing shorthand here. All right, and how do we know that a tax is a tax? Is a tax a particular term that you should be able to define? Yes, it is. It is definitely a specific rule, yeah.
If it produces revenue.
All right, tax equals reduced revenue. Who collects? And what else? The third one. Y'all remember?
Does not function as a penalty.
Well, that's it, but we use
How
a
it's
different phrase for it.
How it's collected?
No, that's who collects.
I feel like who's
The reason why it's collected.
Or who has to pay it?
How much? No, it's about that it's not a punishment, right? Okay. Application. What can we say about application here?
So it is for the general welfare because they're protecting their health and.
Yeah, so Congress, right, because you have some facts on this, Congress determined that it affects health. General welfare. And as to whether this is really a tax, so no punishment mentioned, right? And it would produce money. Okay. Counter argument? 10th Amendment. Again, you have given me the rule for the 10th Amendment, so do you need to state what the rule is here?
Yes.
Same question.
Same question. Do you need to state the rule here?
No.
But you do need to say something more than, the 10th Amendment is a counter argument, right? So, what would you say here, since you've already given me the rule, you'll give me some analysis?
General.
Same thing, invade state power, right? Done.
So you can have the same counter argument?
They're different proposals, right? Yes.
So, when we've already made a rule statement within the question, and that question has these subparts, we don't need to restate it.
That's correct.
So,
But
so
you
we
still
don't-
do need to give me some facts or some analysis.
Okay, so it's not, you said it has its own IRAC paragraph, but as far as when we're supposed to be giving the rule,
If it makes you feel better and if it makes you more organized, just put see above for the rule.
okay. But
Fine
if
by
we
me.
just skipped over anything, you would still obviously
If you-
see.
Right,
Okay.
if I have already checked the mark,
Okay,
because there's only one spot on my sheet for 10th Amendment rule.
okay,
There's not another spot to check for me,
okay.
right? But there is a spot for counter argument for each of the proposals,
Okay.
right? It's just the first time I have counter argument, 10th rule analysis, and then the second time I just have a space for counter argument. Like, do they make a counter argument? And I don't break it down by bullets. Okay? So you do get points for making counter arguments, but you do not need to repeat the rules if you have used that rule for a counter argument in that question. But if you're strictly IRACing yourself, feel free to put a placeholder there. Feel free to go see above for the rule. That's totally fine. What I don't want you to do is to cut and paste the rule from earlier in the question, because it's like a pet peeve of mine. Yes,
Are you saying it's a requirement to make the counter argument, or do you get extra points if you do make one?
it is a requirement. It is part of my 100-point calculation. So it's not extra credit. This is why we talk about dissents. All of the counter arguments are in the dissents. Okay. All right, any other questions on proposal 2? All right, let's do proposal 3 real quick. What power are we talking about here? Spending power. Okay, what's our rule for spending?
General, well, they can spend.
For the general welfare.
The conditions are expressly stated.
Now we've got conditional spending, which has its own separate rule, right? So in some ways, I think that this is like rule 1, like the general rule for spending power, because not all spending has to have conditions on it, right? Right, so the first is rule 1, general welfare, spending for the general welfare. Rule 2, where conditions attached. What do you need?
Must be expressly stated.
Expressly stated?
If coercive,
That's the last one. What do you need?
Ambiguous?
it can't.
That's expressly stated, so.
Yeah, they have to
Oh,
have some
related to a federal
relationship
interest,
to the
particular
spending
national
program.
Okay, unambiguous. Two is
Yeah, it has to have relationship to the program.
an interest national project. Last,
It can't violate any